Today's open after an NBA championship this week in the Milwaukee Bucks. Again, shout out to the Bucks. Is about us in the moment. And I brought this up a few times, so I want to hammer this point home, that we are all bad in the moment. For those of us that do this for a living, myself included, we struggle. We struggle with how we want to get our message across, and then we kind of want to outdo each other. All right, so let's first examine the industry. Because saying I don't know doesn't work. It's not great. It's not a way to really stand out. I will admit, when I kind of look around the landscape of the industry that I'm in and have been for a long time, I'm kind of surprised I've done this well. Because honestly, my approach, there's a ceiling on it. As a non-former player, coach, or executive, or any of that kind of stuff, I didn't even write. And I always feel like writers kind of get the benefit of the doubt with opportunities. And there's still a little bit of that lingering in the industry. But the writer gets more of a chance on some television stuff and opportunities, opinion-based stuff, than some of the guys that actually are trained electronically first and maybe are better organizing their thoughts, not in the word version, but on air. So when you say, I don't know, or if the Suns are up 2-0 and you have 2 hours to tape with Bill Simmons and you say, yeah, we'll see what happens. Bucks probably come back and get him. Like, you got to find a way to fill the time that you were given, the opportunity that you were afforded to be doing this for a living. You have to find things to talk about. And I think anyone that's listened to me over the years knows that rarely will I be like completely dismissive of a team. And sometimes when I am, I'm right. Sometimes when I am, I'm wrong about that too, because now I've done this long enough that I go like, look, I'm surprised all the time. If you had me with this platform in my 20s, I would be writing a lot of dudes off. I'd be like, he sucks. That team sucks. They're terrible, whatever. Or this guy's the best. I'd be convinced. With less experience and less lessons, I would be more convinced I was right about stuff all the time. And as I become more educated on it, I'm less certain about stuff all the time. All right. I remember working in Boston. I had a 3-year run, afternoon show at a station that nobody was really listening to. Our signal was terrible. There were layoffs constantly. I ended up being laid off. It's like really one of the only times I've ever lost a job. And I went over to another affiliate. It had nothing to do with the place I was working at. I was getting a run. They put me on for about a month. And the Red Sox in May, I believe, maybe late April, so we're talking like a month into the season, they blew a lead with the bullpen. And the guy that I was co-hosting with was just ranting and raving about how stupid the manager was and how this guy sucks and this bullpen arm. Like, we were talking about the order in which the bullpen was used, and he was going crazy about it for the entire show. And I just kept saying, like, yeah, whatever, dude. It's April. It's May. It's not that big of a deal. Like, some of the best teams in baseball are going to have probably 20, 25 nights. That's probably the low number that they'd want back from their bullpen. It's just the way it goes. And this bullpen's not even going to look like this bullpen at the end of the season. It's going to be 3 or 4 different arms anyway. So I'm not going to freak out about it. I don't know that teams' seasons are derailed by a blown lead in April and May. And we went to commercial break, and the guy looking at me said, and he didn't look at me, which is even weirder. He looked straight ahead and said, I don't know how you do the job this way, man. I'm like, wait, are you talking to me? He's like, yeah, I don't know how you do the job this way. How do you do the job this way? Because we get to talk Sox every day. He goes, get on the air and say shit. That's what I was taught. I go, well, I don't believe that. I don't feel that, so I can't really do it. And he just said, I don't know how you'll ever. And we even had other discussions because we were friends. He just said, I don't know how you'll ever succeed. Who has your mindset that's actually been really, really successful in this business? So that's an education on the industry. I mean, it happens too. I remember my friend, I think I've shared this with you guys a couple of times. Like, he goes, have you ever looked at the Yahoo Finance summaries after a day of trading? I was like, no, I don't. He goes, pay attention to him for a couple of days in a row. And he was right. The Dow was up 80 points. It's like tech drives trading today. You're like, it's up 80 points. It's not that big of a deal. Drops 100 the next day. Fears of China, slow market. You're like, all right. Gold goes up. Gold soars on Fed decision. Like, wait, and then what if it goes down tomorrow? So like everything you just said, all of your summaries of the previous days didn't really mean anything. And that's something that's always a part of me and a part of this industry that I will struggle with. My all-time favorite one ever. In the moment, Joe Flacco wins a Super Bowl, played 4 of the best playoff games we've ever seen from a quarterback. Merrill Hodge, SportsCenter Monday. Top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL going into the next season. Joe Flacco, number 1. And I was like, that's wrong. But you'd feel like an idiot saying, hey, that's wrong. Like, he's good, but he's not that good. Because that whole time before, I didn't really believe in Joe Flacco. And I still don't even know if I'm right or wrong about it because he put together an epic run. And so with Giannis scoring 50 in Game 7, and by the way, I'm not comparing him to Joe Flacco. Giannis is, I don't even need to finish the thought there. I think you guys get where I'm going with it. But after 50 in one of the defining finals games in the history of this league, because that's what it was, and being down 2-0 and coming back and fighting. And I think the best part about Giannis, too, was carrying every single possession. You basically have to say today it's his league. You have to say when we start going in our obsession with the top 5, top 10 list, which I'm a big part of as well, because I just always like thinking about it. She's like, wait, who really is? And it's not just he's the best in the league. We have to say he's the best player in the world. And those are the rules, because you couldn't be like, you know what, Durant's probably still a little bit better. And I'll admit, like, I kind of feel that. But it seems so stupid to say, because in the moment you're caught up with the momentum of everybody else going like, now he's the best in the world. It's his league. It's his league. I mean, guys that I really like were saying it, like everybody else. And think about like the Giannis timeline of things. We're not even 12 months. We're like 9 months removed, maybe 10 months. Yeah, because they lost in the second round. I have to go back and look at the exact dates here again. But we're less than 12 months from going, I don't know about this Milwaukee team. Now, granted, they had a Drew Holiday. I'm still just 4 weeks removed from looking at Milwaukee's offense, and they won this series with defense and then what Giannis did, by the way. But looking at their offense going, I don't know, they could still win the NBA title, and I'd still have some concerns about them getting a little clogged up on offense. Or maybe they've solved all these things, and for now, we'll see this being part 1 of part 2 and 3 for a really good Bucks team, or we'll see a healthy Nets team beat everybody, and then we'll think, wait, should we have all said that Giannis was clearly the best in the world when we just saw what Durant did, if that were to happen? But health will play a big part of whatever the Nets story is. But you get the point. Like, in the moment, you almost feel obligated to kind of just be like, I think I have to say all these things. Like, I didn't want to go on last night with Simmons and be like, Giannis is really good, but here are my 5 guys ahead of him. Because then you also feel like you're being a dick about the moment. And I definitely don't want to do that kind of stuff. So I went back and looked at some of the stuff that was said over the last few weeks. And this happens every playoff season, because, you know, the guys we doubt have a big game and you're like, okay, now do we have to reevaluate who this guy is, or the guy that we love, whatever. I mean, you understand the point. It's somebody who we love has a bad game. Is he actually not real? And somebody who we don't like has a great game. Like, hey, do we need to update this guy's legacy and think about it a little bit differently? All right. A former NBA player is now an analyst, because I remember seeing this. When the Suns were up 2-0, he said, this is a dynasty in the making. Do you actually know how hard it is to achieve a true dynasty? Like, I don't even know if 3 titles in a row means you're a dynasty. Really, the way I grew up and thought about dynasties, like, I'm talking about more than a 3-year run. 3 titles in 4 years, a three-peat, is it a dynasty? Fine, a three-peat's a dynasty. But let's get to, I don't know, number 2 before we even start throwing that word around. And that's why I always joke, after a team wins a championship, I'll ask on Twitter, hey, have to ask, is this team a dynasty? If the Suns had won, I don't think they're a dynasty, because I'm not sure that we go into next year feeling like they're coming out of the West. That's if they had won a title. And now it's completely different because they didn't. And I think their window's probably a little bit closer to closed than it is wide open, because the other teams in the West are going to get better. We're going to be talking about Chris Paul at 37. And some of the limitations that we thought about some of their other guys, meaning Ayton and Bridges, we saw them show up again in the NBA Finals. You're like, wait, I thought Ayton was this guy. Well, maybe he isn't. Maybe some of those doubts are now confirmed again with the way the series played out. Mikal Bridges, I really like this guy a lot. Do you remember him at a lot of moments in the finals? Probably not. So the same guy that said the Suns are a dynasty, I remember after Russell Westbrook had a triple-double run where he breaks the Big O's record, and then he had Westbrook ahead of Chris Paul on the all-time point guard rankings, which is absurd, and then had Chris Paul knocking on the door to get past Isaiah to be number 2 to Magic within a couple weeks. And I was like, wait, what? We had another former NBA executive say that after the Bucks are down 2-0, that they weren't going to win another game in the finals and are one of the worst finals teams ever. That was being down 2-0. The Suns are good in those first 2 games, but were they so good? Had they done stuff for so many years that you had to be that dismissive of a Bucks team? I guess so. Stephen A. said that Booker's next Kobe. We really got into this Booker mode. Remember, we started talking about this. We're like, hey, he keeps doing this. Then it's going to be starting going into next year. Like, hey, is Booker actually closer to top 5 than he is even top 10? He's not even top 10. He's really good. He's a 2-guard that shoots a lot, doesn't pass much. So I guess we were like, hey, that's Kobe. That's disrespectful to Kobe. And I think Booker's awesome. But Kobe? James Harden, who did say about Giannis, he's just a 7-footer who dunks with no skill. And even the most non-Harden guy, which I think I have been plenty of times, would say, yeah, there's probably a little truth in there from Harden, but it has to feel really good, especially if you're a Bucks fan or if you don't like Harden. We're like, oh yeah, good call. Ayton is the next David Robinson. Former NBA player said that. My own co-host Bill Simmons said it. Do you realize, and I don't think David Robinson's in the Hakeem tier, but do you realize that David Robinson was a center who you could give the ball to and get a bucket when you needed to, right? As physically gifted and as soft as the touches of DeAndre Ayton, he's not David Robinson. But when the Suns were going through their run, and my co-host, like, we even joked about it last night, he's like, hey, the reason why the Suns are doing this, if you really think about it, they have 3 top 20 guys. And now you're like, okay, that's not true. That's not true. And look, even me with Chris Paul, who I never necessarily had as the top 10. Let me make sure I'm covering myself here. But it felt like when you did your top 10 list of players, like who are the skilled, who are the best players in the world, it didn't feel like Chris Paul was on that list, but it felt like if you talked about in importance to winning a game, he was on that list. As an asset, he certainly wasn't because he's 36 and he gets hurt all the time. But if you needed somebody to win one game, how many guys you're actually taking ahead of Chris Paul? And I think I may have had him like 5th, 6th, 7th. And now I don't feel like he's 30th, but now I feel stupid about saying that, even though I'll admit, deep down, I probably still believe it a little bit. And let's look back at just the last, I don't know, by the time this pod comes out, 24 hours. Giannis wins a title, and it becomes, well, the Bucks prove there's another way to do this. And I saw a lot of this. Homegrown, build around your star. Do you think the other teams that drafted a star that doesn't have a ton of support aren't trying to build around that guy? Do you think they watch the Bucks win a title and say, hey, you know what? You want to start getting some better pieces around our star? Hey, yeah, this Bucks model, let's do that. You know where the Bucks lucked out? The Bucks lucked out in that Giannis was a complete unknown. He gained like 50 to 60 pounds, grew to 7 feet tall, and also isn't so Americanized that he's probably still in that early stage of his career of just kind of being happy to be here, right? Like, don't you feel that with him? Now, it's genuine. As I mentioned before, to have your best player care that much, his intensity to be at that level every single possession is a great foundation for a team because everybody else feeds off of that. But I'm guilty of not even a year ago going, you know, Giannis kind of feels like he's the best player in the world. And then I go, why would I say that? Because it's actually Kawhi. Look at the way he finishes some of these possessions when the Clippers are up 3-1 in the Nuggets. And then by the time the entire playoffs are over again, LeBron wins a title. I'm like, why do we ever do this to LeBron? Why do we ever put him behind anybody else? And now we've just done it all over again, where I'll admit, if Durant's foot is behind the line, no one today is suggesting any idea that Durant is inferior to Giannis. So I saw a lot of that stuff. Like, hey, just build around your star, build an arena, do all these different things. You're like, all right, well, you know what else worked? Piling up on free agents for the Miami Heat. Because, you know, last year with the Lakers winning a title, do you think anybody would have said, you know what the best way to do to build your team? Let an agency influence all of your major decisions like the Lakers did. That's the right way to do it. Having talk radio and local markets being like, you know what we need? We need to just align ourselves with an agency to make sure that they're making all of our decisions for us so we get better players in here. I'm not solving the problem because I'm not offering up any solution whatsoever. But it is as predictable as anything in any medium where anyone is talking for a living and having that kind of an opinion, is that this 48-hour window might be the time to listen to us the least.